And like I said, this is just an informal conversation. So what I would love for you to do, Christy, is just tell the people who you are, give us your credentials, all the letters that you went to school and paid for, baby. We need to
Yeah,
know all of them.
these are all the things.
All the things, all the
All the
alphabets.
things. Okay, okay. So, hi everybody. I am Dr. Christie Culpepper-Walker. I have to put that hyphen in there. Praise God. Yes.
Amen.
Uh-huh. So I am a clinical psychologist in the Baltimore area. I actually started my journey, my academic journey at the Tuskegee University, where I got a bachelor's degree in psychology. I went on to South Alabama, University of South Alabama, where I received a master's degree in applied psychology. And then I went on to the University of Tennessee, where I received my doctorate in clinical psychology. And so I met the lovely Lakendra while I was completing my internship at the University of Florida. And we went to church together at good old Spring Hill.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And so after leaving Florida, I was only able to be in Florida for about a year. After leaving Florida, I came up to the Baltimore area to finish a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship at Johns Hopkins University. And so now I'm serving the community
Mm-hmm.
in Baltimore, where I see children, adolescents, and young adults, as well as their families, and I'm conducting child and family therapy.
Amen. Now, as y'all can hear, Christy got the credentials, baby. She got the education, and she got the Jesus.
Yeah.
And so, Christy, on a podcast that I did last year, one of my good friends, Jeff, he also does podcasting, actually got me into podcasting. But we did an episode called Jesus plus therapy plus cupcakes.
Yes,
And
I listened to it.
did you listen to it,
Hilarious.
girl? Me and
Yes.
Jeff like to cut up, but it was important for me. And if you heard this already, Christy, I don't want to be redundant, but for those who may have overlooked that conversation, I encourage you to go back and listen to Jesus plus therapy plus cupcakes. And it was important for me to include Jeff because he is a follower of Christ like myself and like you are, Christy. And we wanted to talk about the stigma that's attached to therapy, especially in the Christian world, right? Where people feel like, oh, and Jeff even said it during the conversation, well, Jesus will or heal all things and solve all things, and he can. But
Yes.
what we know is that the word said that the Lord gave gifts to those to teach, to preach, to and to doctors and to
Right.
counselors. And
Right.
so we wanted to make sure that people understood that it's no harm in going to therapy and seeking out good help. So, Christy, you and I had a wonderful conversation when we were talking about doing this podcast together. And you shared with me so many, I mean, so many nuggets, y'all. I had to go to the Google. I literally spent 2 days researching stuff. Baby, I wrote stuff that the hydro something or other, the acupuncture, the chiropractic.
Yes.
It was just so, it was so much, so many things, so much rich content that you shared with me. And I could not sit on that. I wanted to share with all of my audience, and hopefully someone will be blessed and encouraged by the offerings that you have, Dr. Christie. But one of the first things you said was stop trying to juggle all the balls.
Yes.
Tell us what you mean about that and talk to me because that's me, because I try to juggle everything at one time.
Listen, that's most of us, right? When we think about it. And so I'm talking to everybody, but specifically Black women. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this superwoman complex where we
Mm-hmm.
can do all things at all times and we don't need anybody to help us. We got it because nobody else can do it like we do it anyway.
Right.
And we will ignore signs that our body is giving us, right? Or signs that our feelings and our mood and our mind are giving us. We will ignore that, for the sake of doing all the things or keeping all of the balls in the air, right? And we can't do that because basically what we're doing is continuing to pour from our cup, and that's going to leave us empty, right?
Right.
And you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Amen goes right there.
Right there, right there. And look, that's a word for me too.
Oh, okay, because sometimes you need to encourage your own self, don't you?
Exactly, exactly. And so as I'm saying this to people, and one reason why I take self-care so seriously, because that's something that I have needed for a
Mm-hmm.
long time. And that's something that I know I continuously need because I am in a field where I'm always giving, right?
Right.
And even when I'm not at work, right? Just like most of
Mm-hmm.
us, we're always giving to someone or to some cause or to something. And God calls us to give. So it's not like we're not doing what we're supposed to do. We just got to make sure that we're doing it in a way that we're still supporting ourselves and we're allowing other people to support us.
Absolutely. See, already dropping jewels, and we ain't even like 10 minutes into the conversation yet, Christy. You said something about self-care, and I want to table that for a minute, because what you and I talked about regarding self-care was just so profound, and it's something I talk about all the time. But I want to table that because you had a lot to say about it. But another thing that you brought up that I think is very critical, just like you said, we're talking to everybody, but especially for this one is, I think, is for women in general. These two things that you said to me during our conversations, or three things really. Sometimes you just need to sit down somewhere. That's number one. Number two, don't be afraid to ask for and accept help. And number three, to set boundaries.
Yes.
Those are three important things. Dr. Christie, do you mind just touching on those things, or collectively, and tell us how to sit down and ask for help and to set these boundaries? Because that's for me. I got a problem with all of those things.
So all of that goes together too, right? So sitting down, or as my grandmama would say, sit down somewhere.
Sit down somewhere.
Right, sit down somewhere. We have to first trust that other people can get things done.
Trust.
Right. So if we're not trusting that anybody else can do it, if we still have this mindset that it has to be us, if somebody sits us down, we will get up. Right.
That's me.
So, you got friends that'll say, hey, girl, let me get it. Let me do it. And you'll sit there for a minute. Then you say, but what about? But what if? Well, look, let me just help with, and we do a lot of that. And we'll even sometimes try to bring God into it and say, don't block my blessings. Right.
You're preaching.
Yeah. So we, and really what God is calling us to do is sometimes just trust. Right.
Just trust.
So have faith, just like he gave us gifts, he gave other people gifts.
Exactly. Just trust. I'm writing that down.
We need to allow other people to walk in their gifts. So sitting down really starts with trusting. And it might. Oh, go ahead.
No, because I'm taking notes, Dr. Chris, because I also wrote down allow other people to walk in their gifts.
Right. And I was going to say, it might not get done the way you want it to get done. Somebody might take a whole different route. That doesn't mean that it can't happen and that it won't be successful. So we first got to trust that other people can do. Right. And when people offer their help, accept it. I know a lot of folks that'll say, oh, girl, I just love helping others. And when you say, well, what is it like when other people help you? And they're like, I don't know, because that doesn't really happen. And you're like, oh, do you not have a good support system? Like, what? Tell me why that's not happening. And what it boils down to is they don't accept help. People offer it, right? There are opportunities for it. We don't take advantage of it.
Yeah, you preaching to me. I feel so shamed. You are attacking me right now, and we're supposed to be friends.
Listen, and when I tell you that God will sometimes just go and gather me up real quick with some of these words, because they not just, they for me too. And so we have to do a good job of being able to say, you know what, just like I want to help, just like I love my folks and I want to be able to lighten their load, there are other people that God has put in my life to do that for me. And that's so we have to accept that. And, sometimes even if we won't say it out loud, our actions show that we think that there's something innately wrong with accepting help. So that must mean I'm weak, or I'm going to feel, embarrassed because I needed help. When in actuality, all of us need something at some point. And that actually goes into how people feel about therapy. All right. And we don't see it. Well, I see it because I work with kids a lot. We don't have to say it, but our attitudes, adult attitudes, are passed down to our kids.
Generational curses.
Definitely some generational curses happening. And sometimes it's just generational attitudes, and people are picking up, our kids see, right? So we don't have to say like, oh, therapy is for, people that have something wrong with them. But when your kid sees that you send them to therapy, but you won't go to therapy, right? Then they pick up on things. So I notice as they get older, they come in the room with preconceived notions about therapy. And I have to first work with them on that, because if you're going to be closed off in therapy, you're not going to do any work.
Right. So let's talk about, and that's something we did not talk about, Christy, was these generational attitudes and behaviors that get passed down to kids and how they come in with that wall that you're just talking about. How can we, those of us who are parents, aunties, uncles, who have young people in our lives, and most of us do, right? Most of us have little cousins, little nephews, little nook, and we see that, especially during a period now where we're still very much so in a pandemic. And right now, at the time of the recording of this podcast, it's August 23rd, 2021, and children are just going back to school,
Right.
and they're now having to come back home in quarantine because there have been outbreaks at the school.
Right.
And these, going through that first year of being home and being on lockdown, and now this, I can imagine that there are some children that have, I don't know what to call it, Dr. Chris, I don't know what to call it, but I'm sure that there's some things that they need to get out, right?
Definitely.
So how do we prepare our children, not only for this situation, but when they're dealing with grief and other things, to come to therapy?
So one thing is to model that, right? So openly talk about it, be cognitively flexible, right?
Cognitively flexible.
And be open, right? So, we have to watch what we say. So using words like crazy, I tell my kids when they come in, they're saying things that they've heard. So, I had one kid tell me, well, yeah, I have some anxiety and it keeps me up at night. And I know it's anxiety because I heard the word, right? Like he knew the definition for anxiety. And he said, but I'm not crazy. And I said, well, what made you think you were crazy? Right. And we had a conversation about what that means. And I told him, I said, we don't even use that word here. And the reason why is because therapy is not for quote unquote crazy people. Therapy is for anybody who's going through anything that they need some help or support with. And so that's all of us at any time.
Right. And anxiety is not synonymous with crazy.
Right. And like I told, we don't even I don't even know what that means. Right. Like, what does that word even mean? We talk about behaviors, we talk about symptoms. Symptoms come with a diagnosis, right? And none of the diagnoses in our diagnostic manual is crazy.
Right.
Right. That's not the title of anything that we use. So,
and I think, I'm sorry, Dr. Chris, I was going to say, in specifically in the Black community, we have a very bad habit of using words like that to describe people that have emotional issues. Can I say that? Emotional challenges. And typically we say, oh, she just acting crazy. Oh, she crazy. Things of that nature. That's where our children are picking that up from, right? And then they think that because they have an imbalance emotionally or mentally, that automatically equates to them being crazy. Is that right?
Right. And they know that there's a negative connotation on that. So they want to make sure And sometimes that even means that they will downplay what they're experiencing because they don't want you to think they're quote unquote crazy.
God bless. And it's not that, and God knows, I know I've been guilty of it as well. And I try to be more mindful of the words that I say as I get older, because I realize that the word tells us life and death is in the power of the tongue. What you say, you have to watch what you say, what you put out there, right? And so as I get older, I know for me, I am trying to be more mindful about the words that I use and how I explain things and describe people and things of that nature. But that is so key, because our children are definitely listening. They're definitely soaking up all the things they see and hear.
They pick it up. They do. And you ask me, what else can we do, especially as they're going back to school? Talk to them, right? So have open and honest conversations with them about what they're feeling. Right. So a lot of kids won't even realize the connection. And we have some adults, not just kids, but they don't realize the connection between what they feel emotionally and what they feel physically. Right. And they won't actually get that connection until they talk to someone that can guide them through that. But for instance, one of my really close friends, her son, it was time for him to go back to school. He's in Alabama. And as they were driving, she was driving him to school. He said, "Are you driving faster?" And she was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "It seems like the closer we get to the school, the faster you're driving." And she said, "But that's not true. Like, I've been driving the same speed this entire time." And so she, just simply asked him a few questions. And he said, "Can your heart be nervous even if you're not?"
Oh,
I know. right?
That's such a sweet question.
That's such a sweet question, and he's such a sweet baby. But and we had a talk about what that meant, and like I told her, that was his way of saying I'm nervous. Now
Mm-hmm.
he hadn't put two and two together that he was fully nervous. All he knew was his heart was nervous.
Right.
Right. But those types of conversations, making sure that our kids understand what you're feeling emotionally, that comes out. Right. And so we
Right.
have to be aware of our emotions then in order to address them.
And then too, Dr. Christie, with you talking about the language that baby used, we
Mhm.
have to be very intentional with our listening when we're talking to our children and having these conversations that you're suggesting, because again, this speaking from a Black mom experience, sometimes when you're talking to your kids and they say stuff like that, sometimes we snap back, what you mean your heart? What?
Right.
And we don't internalize or really think about what that really means, like from a physical standpoint, because like you said, that's all our baby knew, is that his heart was shaking a little bit faster than it
Right.
should be. and
Right.
so and so as an adult, we have to be able to recognize that language and
Mhm.
kind of be an interpreter and recognize what that
Exactly.
means.
Exactly. And the way that we do that is to be in the moment.
Mm,
So that's that mindfulness and that awareness piece, right? So there's an image that says, basically, is your mind full or are you being mindful, right?
I love that.
Yeah, and it's a very, very kind of easy to interpret image, because you see on one side with the mindful, right, the person is thinking about the car and the gas and the money and the house and work and all these things. And then on the mindful side, you just usually it's like a picture of an animal, and the
Mm,
animal is just taking in what's around them. And so,
interesting.
really what we need to do more of is make sure that we're being in the moment, we're being fully present, we're able to take in what's around us. So when your kid says, can your heart be nervous? If you're thinking about, I got to get to work, the traffic's bad, right? And he's back here talking and, he's asking me questions, I don't have time for that. You might snap at it.
Hmm.
Yeah, as opposed to if you're in the moment, like my friend was, then you'll understand, like, oh, wait, he's feeling something,
Right.
and all of this goes together. He wasn't just critiquing my driving. He was trying to tell me that he's feeling something on the inside about the fact that he's about to go back to school for the first time in a year and a half.
Right. Oh, that's rich. That's good right there. That's good. So I want to kind of try to tie that in mindfulness
Mhm,
with setting boundaries, because that's something you and I talked
mhm.
about as well.
Yeah.
And I know for a while, Christy, I had a problem with setting boundaries, and most of it was me not saying no to
Mhm,
people. That goes back to trying to juggle all the balls and all of that stuff. So one of the boundaries I had to set for myself was not um not making myself feel bad if I
mhm.
needed to tell someone no, if I didn't have the bandwidth to do
Yeah.
something and stop trying to put one more ball in the air. So, how can you help me and everyone that listens to I Just Want to Talk help us set boundaries, healthy boundaries?
Yes. Yeah. So you said a key phrase when you said, like, I don't have the bandwidth.
Hmm.
Right. So you only know that when you're being mindful. So that's how that ties in.
Okay.
Right? So if you're paying attention to where you are, if you're paying attention to how you feel, if you are taking the time to sit and kind of reflect, okay, this is what my week looks like. This is what I have the personal resources for, right? Then
Hmm.
you already know when someone calls, and it could be someone you absolutely love, right? But they call and they need, as some of my friends say, a session, right? They need to talk, or they need you to come and do something, or they need you to show up and be present. If you've already checked in with yourself and you know you don't have the bandwidth, you don't have the personal resources, then you're able and you're allowed to say no, respectfully, no, not this time. And what I tell my parents and my kids all the time in therapy, you are actually doing them a favor,
Hmm.
right? In a couple of ways. So, one way, you're helping other people see that boundary setting is okay. So, you're modeling good boundaries,
Right.
but also you're not trying to overextend yourself and not give them what they actually need in the moment, right? Because if you're only at half strength and you're trying to give them full strength, something's going to fall short.
Right.
Right. So when you take care of you, you're actually able to better take care of other people, if that's like your motivation and your driving
Yeah.
force.
Absolutely. And you said something very critical. I cannot say yes to somebody and do anything with
Mm.
excellence if I'm not taking care of myself and being mindful of what Lakendra needs,
Right.
and before I try to attend to something else. So with that, taking care of yourself, Dr. Chris, that's a perfect segue to you telling us about self-care. And I know one of the things that when you and I spoke, you said this term that I had never heard before, which was sleep hygiene.
Yes.
And wow, when you say it, it makes so much sense. And I wonder, why have I never used this term before? But to me, that just goes right into self-care. So what I would love for you to do is, because when you explained your definition of self-care, it was very different from when I talk about it. So tell us what your definition of self-care is, and then you could slide in sleep hygiene. I would love that.
Yes, definitely. So for me, self-care is intentionally, right, pouring into yourself, taking care of yourself. And I said intentionally that way because that's the piece. So a lot of people would say, self-care is massage, self-care is getting your hair done. Self-care can be a number of activities, right? It's not as much about the activity as it is about the intentionality. So
That's good.
Massage is not going to work for everybody. If you don't like touch, massage should not be a part of your self-care regimen, right? If you don't really like outdoors, hiking should not be a part of your self-care regimen.
Amen.
So, we have to do the things that pour back into us. Right. And that's different for everybody. Now, things like sleep hygiene, good nutrition, movement, stuff like that, that's for all of us. And sleep hygiene, when we were talking about that, I actually thought about it. I got a lot of my sleep training while I was in Florida.
Really?
Yes. So Florida has, University of Florida Shands has a very good sleep program that I actually saw a lot of great kids and adults through that program. But one thing we find, people take certain things for granted. So sleeping, eating, if you're sleeping, your eating is off, it's hard for you to get a lot of things done because that's kind of your foundation.
Right.
So we know when we sleep, that's when our body recuperates, it rejuvenates, right? Our mind, all those things happen. And so if our sleep is not great, then we're kind of starting off our day from a rocky place. And so good sleep hygiene would be you getting enough sleep. And notice I didn't say a number because the number is different for everybody, right? But getting an ample amount of sleep where you're not waking up feeling tired. And if you are getting, let's say, 8-9 hours of sleep and you're still waking up feeling tired, then really what we're talking about is your quality of sleep at that point. So you have quantity, but then you have quality.
Right.
And sometimes, if we can't really figure it out, it's time for us to go see a sleep specialist to try to figure out what's happening with that quality of sleep.
Interesting. So some key nuggets I took away there, and you didn't even say it, but this is what I gathered. Is with our sleep hygiene, it's okay to go to a sleep study or a sleep specialist.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, because sometimes that part is needed, right? Just like sometimes we need to go to a therapist, sometimes we need to go, and we'll talk about chiropractic and acupuncture services in a minute. But like all of those things are there to kind of help us, one, identify if there's a concern, and then if so, help us treat it. Right. So like if you have sleep apnea, do people get along, throughout their life with sleep apnea and they don't get it treated? They do. Do they have the best quality of life? Probably not. Right. So because that wears on your body.
Right.
You're not getting the type of sleep that you need. A lot of people with sleep apnea that's untreated, they feel sluggish throughout the day. They might fall asleep or nod off at different times of the day. And so it's really the difference between whether or not we're just existing or whether we're living. Right. And the Bible says God came so that we have life and have it more abundantly.
Amen.
And so we want all that God would have for us. So that means that we have to make sure that we're operating in an optimal place.
Absolutely. See, just jewels dropping consistently here today. I'm so full already. And I wanted to bring back the thing about going to a sleep specialist is because, and this is for me, and I know I can't be the only one, Dr. Christie, but like when I think of getting myself together, right? And I'm an advocate for therapy, and I push it all the time on my podcast and otherwise. But I'm ignorant to the other specialists and things out there, right? So when you and I were talking about acupuncture and we were talking about going to a chiropractor and things like that, it never really dawned on me. Like these are other specialists and doctors and professionals that help us recharge and refuel and make sure that our body is in sync, and our emotions, and use another word when you're talking about acupuncture. I'll let you talk about it. To get all those things, and
Right.
energy. I think it was you were talking about energy
The chi.
specifically. The
Yeah.
chi, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us about, because when you talked about you were going to acupuncture and chiropractic, now that really just blew my mind because I never considered it. So tell us about how
Right.
that plays a part into our self care.
Definitely. So one, let me say, when you were talking about like the different, types of professionals, I believe in having a team, right?
Mm,
Right. So I look at, me and my loved ones as a team, right?
mm-hmm.
They're hashtag team Christie, right? And I'm on their team. I feel the same way about how I approach my health, right? So mental health,
Okay.
and my spiritual health, everything, we should have a team of people. And so my team consists of, right, my primary care, acupuncturist, my chiropractor, therapist, right? Like it's a lot of people involved in my care. And when you think about what all we put out and what all our needs might be, it takes a number of different people on
Mm-hmm.
your team to address kind of all of those things, right? And keep you at your best. And so one thing about acupuncture and chiropractic services for me, I wasn't exposed to that until I needed it. And I'll tell you guys a little bit about my story in a second. I would love, and I push this all the time, let's do things preventatively, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we don't want to wait until there's a problem to then say, okay, let's go to this place. Get your yearly checkups, right? Whether you're feeling good or not, let's go and make sure, like, those are the things that keep us at our best instead of us being reactive and having to go after something.
Right.
Right. So I would love for people to be able to do chiropractic services as a preventative measure. Same thing with acupuncture. Now, my journey with acupuncture, I always had a lot of sinus issues. I used to get sinus infections all the time, like at least once every 2 to 3 months, right? And most of the time, people will prescribe antibiotics for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of antibiotic use is just not great for us, right? Like it really doesn't work with our system well. And so someone happened to mention to me, one of my coworkers, she said, oh, I used to have migraines all the time. Even taking daily migraine medicine, she would have multiple migraines a week. And doing our job, you have to talk a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's just not, going to be great for you and your business.
Right.
And so she said, I started going to this acupuncturist, and she kind of helped move chi. And I was like, what is chi? And she started telling me chi is your energy, right? And it flows a certain way. And sometimes it gets stuck for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes trauma. So like if you broke a bone or something, right, that can make chi get stuck. But also emotional trauma can make your chi get stuck, right? And so she was like, I went, and now I'm not even taking daily migraine medicine, and I only have maybe 1 or 2 migraines a month.
Wow.
So that was enough for me to say, okay, let me go try. I promise you not. I had a sinus infection the week before I went to see this acupuncturist. And mind you, I said I had one usually about once every 2 to 3 months, right? I have not had a sinus infection since 2018.
Wow.
I went
That
in.
that that that's enough. Listen, listen, listen. That right there, Dr. Christie, that's enough. We should all be running to the Google right now to find somebody to go get some acupuncture done.
And make sure it's acupuncture, not dry needling, because that's different.
Oh, that's okay. See, I didn't even know that
Mhm.
was a thing.
So, and
So,
that's something we talked about a little bit, was making sure that when we are looking for providers, that
mhm.
we ask the right questions and we know what we're looking for, right?
So when
So
we're looking for an acupuncturist, we need to specifically say, do you do acupuncture or do you do dry needling?
right. And are you following all of the acupuncturists I've talked to say that they are doing traditional Chinese medicine?
Hmm.
So TCM. So are you actually following traditional Chinese medicine, or are you doing something else?
Okay. Y'all, I'm taking notes and I hope you are too, because baby, Dr. Christie is dropping jewels.
So that's the acupuncture. Now, chiropractic services I had before, but again, it was reactive. I had been in a car accident, and someone said, "Oh, you should go see a chiropractor just to make sure everything is okay." Well, when I went and I was doing those services, a long time ago. I was probably maybe 20. I was like, oh, things feel better, right? Like
Hmm.
you feel better. Well, you stop doing it because you're thinking you're only doing it because you were in the car accident. When in actuality, that can be a preventative service as well. And so now I'm doing chiropractic services about once a week just to keep me in line, right? Because if you think about it, we're sitting a lot, right?
Hmm.
Or, as we get older, we're twisting and tweaking things. And so this is just a way to make sure that you kind of stay, in this progression of optimal health.
So let me ask a question about chiropractic services
Mhm.
specifically, because when I did my 2-day Google search for chiropractors, and I'm not even kidding, I saw that there was one in particular that piqued my interest because they offered massage therapy after the chiropractic session.
Okay.
And so one of my friends just happened to mention that her chiropractor doesn't offer in their offices, but strongly encourages after you go through our session, go get yourself a massage. Do you have
Mhm.
any experience with that, Dr. Christie, and why that's important?
So actually, my chiropractor has a massage therapist that shares the space. So she
Hmm.
rents space to this particular massage therapist, and it's her masseuse as well. So I
Okay.
definitely go to her. And from what she's explained to me, she's aligning bone, right? Like she's tweaking muscles and things like that. And
Hmm.
the masseuse is coming in and trying to kind of help flush out these toxins by manipulating the muscles.
Hmm.
So it's for her, the way that she explained it to me, it's kind of going hand in hand.
That's how I took it as well. So
Mhm.
sounds like to me, I need to take a whole day off from work, go get me some acupuncture, go get me some chiropractic services, and get myself a massage. And then I go get myself a pedicure because I like pedicures and it
Uh-huh.
brings me joy.
And that's
Um,
part of your self-care.
of my self-care, right? Because I'm not going to go hiking because, I like to look outside. I don't like to be outside. It's two
Right. Because that's
totally different
different.
things.
Uh-huh. That's
That's
different.
different. That's really different. So that's real good. That's really good. And I think that one thing that you said earlier, Dr. Christie, about when you were talking about sleep hygiene, and you said uh, for different people, the number is different. We've always been taught like you have to get like 6 to 8 hours of sleep every night.
Yeah.
Why is that a myth?
So it depends on what stage you're in. And I think people give us kind of like this information and they don't say it depends. And that's one
Hmm.
thing that I learned throughout my training with psychology. Everything depends because we're people, right? And so that's why, like, you can't say psychology is an exact science
Hmm.
because we're dealing with people and people are different, right? So we know that kids need, depending on their age, right, somewhere upwards of like 10 hours of sleep.
Hmm.
And so that's why when parents come in and they say, oh, they're so hard to get up in the morning. And I say, well, what time did they go to bed? Oh, well, probably around midnight. And you trying to get them up
Ooh,
at 6,
child. Hey, that's
right?
hard for me to get up.
Exactly. And that's what I say. Think about us, right? Like you're not bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It was 6 hours,
Right.
right? And they're still growing. Their body needs that extra. Right. And then as we get older, we say, okay, we don't need quite as much. But then once you get on the other side of older, you
Hmm.
require more. So it really just kind of depends on where you are. And it depends on who you are. I know some people, 30s, 40s, they need 9 to 10 hours right now.
That's me.
And that's okay. Right. Once we know that, and that's what I tell kids, I want them to figure out who they are, how they work, and know that that'll change in stages, but be mindful enough and make sure that they're doing self-reflection and they're self-aware enough that they can kind of tailor what they're doing to what they need and
Right.
whatever stage they're in.
See, rich content, Dr. Christie. So I want to make sure because I know people are going to be asking me, how can I make an appointment with Dr. Christie? But you are in Maryland, so
I'm
and
in
I
Maryland.
don't want to profess to know how these things work.
Uh,
But can you service people around the country, or how does that work?
So not at this time, right? So one, all of my therapy services come through the institute that I work for right now. So everything that I do outside of work is more like this, where I'm kind of teaching and training and talking to people about different things. I would be more than happy to help connect people with services. But
Mm-hmm.
I can say, because I was in Gainesville, Shands Hospital, right? So the psychology program there, they have some awesome therapists working actually in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can definitely get outpatient services for kids as well as adults at Shands. And there are plenty of places around Gainesville. Now, when you are looking for a therapist, right, you want to make sure there's someone you're comfortable with. And it might
Mm-hmm.
take you a couple of sessions to kind of figure that out. But you also want to make sure that that person has some knowledge in whatever it is you're coming in with. Right. So if you want to talk about anxiety, but they do more grief therapy, right, or grief counseling, that might not be the person for you. And so what I always encourage people to do is call and ask questions. Right. Ask them
Mm-hmm.
about their
Mm-hmm.
training. Right. Ask them. And I know, a lot of lay people or, people in the community might not understand about like cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that. But you can say, what's your approach? Right? Do you collaborate with the people that you're talking to? Are you flexible with your time? So you want to talk about scheduling, all of those types of things. But I really emphasize that people should advocate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell people what you're looking for, and then trust your gut.
That's good advice right there. And I'm so glad that you brought that to light, Dr. Chris, about making sure that the person that you're talking to can service the thing that you
Mhm.
need counseling. And that's very important. I have one last question for you, Dr. Chris. I'm going to try to tie them in together
Okay.
and see if you can answer them together. So one thing that Jeff and I talked about in our podcast, what Jeff brought up is that he loves his therapist because he says that his therapist is treating him in such a way that he won't need therapy anymore,
Yes.
like treating him in such a way that he doesn't have to continuously make appointments. So my question is there a frequency that people should schedule therapy appointments, number one? And number two, when we are seeing a therapist, should our therapist be helping us in such a way that we don't need them anymore?
Yes. So short answer to the first one, it depends. The absolute answer to the second one is definitely. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
this is not, and there are some people who do therapy for years and years. And sometimes it's what we call supportive therapy. So they
Mm-hmm.
have someone there to kind of just guide them and have someone to talk to. That is different from most of definitely the therapy that I do and most therapists that you would find, right? Especially because of insurance and different limitations.
Mm-hmm.
But the general consensus is that I would hope to put myself out of business.
Oh,
Okay. And I tell my patients that I would hope that I don't have a job, because it's not that people won't have problems.
right.
We're supposed to be giving people the skill set to be able to address their problems on their own. Now,
Wow.
because the world is what it is, we know that people like me will always have a job. Right.
Wow.
But
But
that's the goal.
no, that's very profound that you said it in that manner, that you hope that you won't have a job one day. And so what I hope my listeners will take away from this, number one, is it is okay. It is still
Mhm.
okay to love Jesus or your deity of choice
Yes.
and have a therapist. Your
Yeah.
therapist is there to help you. Make sure that the therapist that you seek out is there to service the issue that you have. And their job, their role is to make sure that you don't need them anymore, to give you the tools that you need to move forward in life and
Mhm.
not have to need them. But it's okay if you need to come back and be like, I need to talk about this
Definitely.
issue.
Definitely. And so just to give you a little bit more about that first question you asked me with the time frame, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, usually I would say in order to build a good relationship with your therapist, at first you're going to see them more often than not. So usually I start off with weekly sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And as we see progress and as you learn more of the skills and you're coming in and you're telling me more about how you dealt with it versus asking me how to deal with it, then I am putting more and more time in between our sessions until finally we're in what we call the maintenance phase. So you might be coming in once a month, once every 2 months. And then at some point, we're going to do what we call terminate. The kids always think that's funny. So when I say, oh, we're going to terminate services, but that just means, you're at a place where you can do this, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have the skill set. You can,
Marge,
definitely,
it's fine.
oh, the
That's
baby.
Marge. That's Marge.
Uh-huh. Hey,
She had a,
Mark.
she had an opinion. She usually does.
Right, and that's totally okay, Marge. But
It's
yeah,
not.
but you're doing things where maybe you're saying to yourself, and I know when my kids come in and they say, I thought, what would Dr. Cece say?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, so you are, in your head kind of thinking about your skills, and you're
Right.
thinking your way through things. And so then we terminate or discharge. And again, if you need to come back, you definitely come back, because sometimes life throws stuff at you. And
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely. See, jewels and nuggets all day long. Dr. Christie, thank you so much for being
listen,
on. I just want to talk. Let me tell you something, y'all. With me, I swear to goodness, Christy, I don't even remember our first conversation. I just know anytime you and I talk, we always laugh. I always leave
always.
our feeling good, like do.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Mhm.
we just had this connection, and I'm just so glad that the Lord brought us together. I'm glad He
Yeah.
brought you to Gainesville so we could connect, because, like I told you when we had our initial conversation, who knew that we would be in this space, that
Yeah.
you will be where you are, and we're thankful for you being where you are and helping people and being able to teach us, and give us these nuggets, honey, and these tools, because we need these chiropractors, we need acupuncturists that are doing TCM. If you're taking your notes, you know what that means, because she
Yes.
gave us the answer. You told us to be in the moment. You told us to be mindful of our these generational attitudes, and be careful about the words that we say and how we're instilling things into our children, because that's really important, because we may be creating behaviors and attitudes that's making them go into therapy, right,
Yeah.
without them even going through a situation.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
we want to
And
be mindful of that.
without us even knowing sometimes too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like I would say the biggest takeaway here, be mindful,
Be
be
mindful.
aware, be in the moment, because when you're in the moment, you're able to catch things that you wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
normally caught, right? And then be intentional. Be intentional with your time, be intentional about your self-care, be intentional with your boundaries, right? And be intentional with doing the things that God has called you to do.
Amen. And I talk about that all the time, just walking in your ministry, because
Yeah.
people out here need your gifts. We need them.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, Dr. Christie, how can people, even though we can't make an appointment with you because I'm in Florida,
Mm.
I can call you and say, hey,
Yes,
girl,
you can.
hey.
Yes, you can. Yes.
But for everyone else, where can we get in touch with you and keep up with you?
Definitely. So you guys can find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page called Heart and Soul Mental Health. So it's Heart, HEART, and AND, Soul, SOUL, Mental Health. And that's on Facebook. You can also follow me on Instagram at Heart and Soul. So HEART, the letter N, SOULMH.
Heart and soul, y'all. Y'all listen. Y'all heard her drop these jewels of nuggets on us today. You better start following Heart and Soul now, because when she blow up, when you circle back, she charging triple. I can tell you that right now. She charging
Look,
triple.
listen, I receive all of that.
Hey, Shundo. And I bet your husband do too.
Look, he does. Yes.
Dr. Christie, thank you again for coming on. I just want to talk. I hope that we can do this again.
Definitely.
I talk about self-care and therapy so much, and having you on here to just reiterate some of the things that I talked about and to teach me some things too is greatly appreciated. So we will keep up with you. We will follow you on the Instagrams and the Facebooks, and make sure that that you are liking and following, because you do speaking engagements as well.
I
So
do.
we want to be
I
sure
do.
that we follow those speaking engagements so we can continue to glean more knowledge from you, Dr. Christie. Thank you so much.
Well, and thank you for having me. And I just want to say thank you for having this platform, because it's so needed. And
Thank you.
you've been a blessing to me personally. And I know that you're a blessing many, many people with your platform.
Listen, I'm just trying to do what you said. I'm just trying to use my gift
That's intentionally.
intentionally and being
Yeah.
mindful about it. Amen.
Yeah, amen. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Christie.
You're welcome.